A huge number of Russian drones violated Polish airspace as Russia targeted an area in Ukraine bordering Poland overnight into Wednesday.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen delivered her State of the Union annual address, touching on topics such as Ukraine and Gaza.
More than 200 protesters were arrested by French police as nationwide demonstrations erupted following the collapse of the government.
Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk held an emergency cabinet meeting after the country downed a huge number of Russian drones over its airspace. Poland's armed forces reported the unprecedented intrusion early Wednesday morning, saying multiple drone-type objects had violated the country's skies. The incident is the first time Russian drones have been shot down over a NATO member state. Tusk said Poland had requested to invoke Article 4 of the NATO treaty in response to the incursion, which allows member countries to raise an issue to NATO's main decision-making body. The drones fell into Poland's airspace as Russia carried out strikes against Ukraine, including parts of western Ukraine that border the Eastern European country. Polish and NATO aircrafts were sent scrambling to deal with the threat, with at least 19 drone incursions recorded. Perhaps 3 or 4 were shot down, a significant number from Belarus, which borders Poland to the east. Travel was disrupted across Poland as Warsaw's international airport, alongside 3 others, suspended flights as a result of the drones. Tusk said officials were working slowly to open airports as authorities moved to searching for the wreckage of the drones. Citizens were advised to be careful of debris, but not to panic in the wake of the incident.
European countries have rushed to Poland's support following an unprecedented Russian drone attack overnight into Wednesday. The Kremlin fired the barrage targeting a Ukrainian town bordering Poland, with Warsaw saying a huge amount of drones entered Polish airspace. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer denounced the attack, noting that his government will continue working on bringing an end to the war.
The attack last night in Poland shows that Putin's belief that he can somehow act with impunity. And that's why we're working so hard with the coalition of the willing to ensure that there are security guarantees as we go forward, made real progress in recent weeks. We must continue to ramp up the pressure on Putin.
German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius, in a parliamentary address, also condemned the attack and urged Europe to accelerate its efforts to bolster its defenses.
Wir dürfen keine Zeit verlieren, wenn es die Stärkung unserer Verteidigungsfähigkeit geht. Glaubwürdige Abschreckung, robuste Einsatzbereitschaft und die verlässliche Unterstützung unserer Partner, das sind die Maßstäbe, an denen wir uns messen lassen müssen.
Amsterdam, who played a part in shooting down the drones, highlighted the scale of the threat Russia continues to pose on European security.
These violations are unacceptable and underscore that the Russian threat continues to grow. As said, we will defend every inch of NATO territory, and we cannot accept Russia's actions. And that's why we have to keep asking ourselves, what more can we do to support Ukraine?
Warsaw has since triggered Article 4 of the NATO Charter to consult with its allies and formulate a response to this aggression.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen took to the stage in her State of the Union annual address to the European Parliament in Strasbourg on Wednesday. After emphasizing that Europe is in a critical fight for its freedom, democracy and future, the president began by addressing foreign affairs, including the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. Von der Leyen also condemned an earlier attack on Wednesday when multiple Russian drones were shot down over Poland's airspace during an attack on Ukraine.
And just today we have seen a reckless and unprecedented violation of Poland and Europe's airspace by more than 10 Russian Shahid drones. Europe stands in full solidarity with Poland.
On Ukraine, the president highlighted Europe's responsibility to support Kyiv, whilst also urging the return of the abducted Ukrainian children held in Russia, like Sasha, who she invited to the hemicycle.
There are tens of thousands more Ukrainian children whose fate is unknown, trapped, threatened, forced to deny their identities. We must do everything in our power to support Ukraine's children. And that is why I can announce that, together with Ukraine and other partners, I will host a summit of the International Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children. Every abducted child must be returned.
On Gaza, von der Leyen proposes a series of measures to help resolve the conflict, consisting of putting their bilateral support to Israel on hold, proposing sanctions on the extremist ministers and on violent settlers, and putting a partial suspension of the association agreement on trade-related matters. The president clearly condemned the current Israeli man-made famine on Palestinians.
Man-made famine can never be a weapon of war. For the sake of the children, for the sake of humanity, this must stop.
Von der Leyen finally called for the EU to move from unanimity to a qualified majority on foreign policy to avoid vetoes and make the process of taking decisions faster. As opposition to the president has deepened inside the European Parliament, the hour-long address marks the official start of the new working year for the bloc's institutions.
Here at the Porte de Montreuil in eastern Paris, one of the major axes that leads into the center of the French capital. The atmosphere has been tense since the early morning. Demonstrators lit rubbish bins on fire and also tried to barricade roads such as these with different obstacles.
Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez?
Dans un sens, ils ont raison. Il faut faire quelque chose.
But police who are deployed in large numbers have been dismantling obstacles as soon as they appear and chasing the protesters away. Elsewhere in the capital, the demonstrators burst onto the Paris Ring Road, the busiest highway in Europe, attempting to block traffic. But once again, police intervened quite quickly to chase them away. Today's mobilization is known as Block Everything, and it's part of a nationwide day of protests and strikes. The goal is to disrupt transport, schools, and daily life in general across France to try to increase pressure on the government. Just 2 days after Prime Minister François Bayrou's government collapsed due to his unpopular and austere 2026 budget plan.
C'est de la provoque pure, c'est du foutage de gueule, si je me permets. C'est tout à fait contre notre volonté. On ne veut pas un gouvernement de droite, on ne veut pas Sébastien Lecornu, on ne voulait pas Bayrou, on ne voulait pas Barnier. Pourquoi toujours prendre ces décisions qui sont contre nous? Et il le sait, et il déstabilise le gouvernement totalement. Et même sur une échelle internationale, il déstabilise le pouvoir du gouvernement en France, parce que tout le monde est divisé.
And while police presence has so far limited the impact here in Paris, well, more demonstrations and actions are planned throughout the day, not only in Paris, but across the whole country.
US President Donald Trump stopped short of fully condemning Israel's strike on the Qatari capital of Doha on Tuesday, despite growing condemnation from international leaders. The Trump administration said Israel action was unilateral and that it was unfortunate that Qatar, a key US ally, was targeted.
Well, I'm not thrilled. I'm not thrilled about it. I don't have to do that. I'm not thrilled about the whole situation. It's not a good situation. But I will say this, we want the hostages back, but we are not thrilled about the way that went down today.
Israel said it targeted senior Hamas leadership in the strike on Doha in a widening of its campaign against the militant group. The strike came after a gunman killed 6 at a bus stop in Jerusalem on Monday. Hamas claimed its leadership was intact, with 5 lower-level members killed in the strike. Qatar condemned the move as a blatant violation of international law, alongside the EU, France, Spain and the United Kingdom, who called for an end to escalation in the Middle East.
Up to 3 prisoners are forced to share this 9 square metre cell. This is common in Belgium, where prisons face severe overcrowding. Violence tends to rise when resources are lacking, putting both inmates and staff at risk. We visited a neglected prison in Brussels that has been taken over by an association aiming to raise awareness of lives like Jean-Luc's. He returned to the very walls where he spent 18 years, enduring many difficult moments.
Bien sûr qu'il y a des tensions. Moi, j'ai été victime de 4 tentatives de meurtre, dont une à 18 ans, où un gars est rentré dans ma cellule, il croyait que j'avais tué sa copine, et qui m'a massacré. Et je me souviens que les gardiens m'ont sauvé la vie, ils m'ont emmené dans la douche, j'étais tout nu là, et il y a l'eau qui coulait, et je déféquais entre mes fesses, et je pissais le sang. On n'oublie pas les images comme ça.
Experts say psychological and family support are essential for improving inmates' behaviour, but overcrowding hinders the process.
On n'en a pas d'assistants sociaux, de médecins, de psychiatres qui prennent en charge cette question pour permettre à ces personnes de sortir dans un meilleur état que dans lequel elles sont rentrées. Et donc, on voit que la prison crée beaucoup de problèmes et crée de l'insécurité, puisque le taux de récidive de personnes qui recommencent est très élevé en Belgique. Donc, on voit que la prison est un échec dans la sécurisation de la société.
Belgium is one of the European countries with the most overcrowded prisons, housing over 13,000 inmates in facilities designed for just 11,000. This is a widespread problem across Europe, particularly in countries such as France, Italy and Cyprus.